Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of the Infinity series and founder of Engine Books. Let's see what we have today. Thanks for joining me. Today we have a very special author on. It is Lauralana Dunne, the superstar short story author who recently put out her first full novel, Ashes, which came out in June 2020 from Engine Books. From the back cover, when 15-year-old Phoenix loses her caregiver, everyone that she has ever known inexplicably turns their backs on her. Given the impossible burden of repaying an unknown debt, Phoenix sets out on her own, with her trusty donkey, Mueller, as her only companion. However, the roads are not safe, and Phoenix finds herself navigating the unfamiliar terrain of the darkened wood, scrambling to escape the unseen creatures that have designated her their prey. A chance encounter with Malcourt, a mysterious traveler, not only saves her life, but sets her on a trajectory that she would have never thought possible. Thank you for joining us, Lauralana Dunne.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing... Is this Laura?
Yes.
You sound way too nice to be Laura.
Oh, thank you so much.
How's it going?
It is all right.
That's good. Yeah, so this will be fun. This is good. This is fun. How are you?
We've covered that, but I am all right. How are you?
It's early. I got up and I got my writing goal in, and I'm still on my second cup of coffee, so my brain's not quite awake, and I'm kind of looking at it going, wait, if I already got my writing goal in, and yet I'm not awake enough to speak, God, what are those words gonna look like?
Good luck to you, my friend.
Yeah. Maybe I just, hit the letter A a bunch of times until I got to 500, and I was like, Dunsies!
Well, you'd have to hit space as well, so it's at least two whole different keys.
Well, thank you for joining us on the Write Project podcast. We've got a very special episode today. I know I say they're all special, but we have a first-time novelist on, which is always fun. We've got Lauralana Dunne on. She's the author of Ashes. Yeah, so this is her first interview with the Write Project podcast about her novel, her first interview about her novel, to my knowledge, and her very first novel, so a lot of firsts. Laura has had a long and storied career. She invented and owns the copyright to sarcasm, so that's wonderful. Anyone who ever uses sarcasm has to pay Lauralana Dunne royalties. I don't know if you all know that, but it's true. Thank you for coming on the Write Project podcast, Lauralana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I don't know how I've never asked you this before. Do I I keep defaulting to calling you Laura. Is that wrong? Should I be calling you Lauralana?
No, both are great.
Both are. It's like Matt and Matthew to you?
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Alright, well, I already know about Ashes because I read it several times and loved it and consider it one of the best first novels I've ever read, actually, which is
I'll take it. Nice.
Which is a growing opinion, because your editor, Allie House, who's quite tenacious, really enjoyed it as well. Tell me about Ashes in your words. What's it about?
That's a great question. My answer changes every time. I don't really have an elevator pitch or a canned response. Basically, it's a high-end fantasy. The world is brand new. It's something I've come up with. In the past, I've described it as a coming-of-age story.
Yeah.
A young woman kind of is put in a situation in her life where she's not pleased. She doesn't want to continue down a certain path. So she basically forges a new one, and, malarkey happens along the way. I learned after the fact that it follows the hero's journey, so that's interesting because while it's a type of book I always kind of grew up reading, I didn't realize there was a set, way to write it or thing, if this happens, this should happen at this point kind of thing. So I had a beta reader who went through it recently, and at the end of it, he asked me if I had modeled it upon that. And I said, no, it's something I realized after the fact, once people started actually reading it, that it existed.
Yeah.
It was actually, he gave me a really nice compliment. He said I could tell, because people who write in that style without realizing there's a step formula tend to do it really well or interestingly, and I really appreciated that.
No, that's true. I found that of my early horror stuff. Like, I wasn't yet aware of the formula, and I kind of miss not being aware of it, because, like, because now I can't get it out of my head, and which is hypocritical of me because I teach the formula in my classes, but, like, I find it works, like, as a third draft step. I just wish I could forget it in the first draft, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
To me, yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, stories set in certain genres tend to follow it regardless of whether the author intended a lot of the time, because it's so omnipresent. Like, if you've watched enough fantasy, then even if you don't know what the hero's journey is, you kind of know the basic steps, because every single fantasy novel, movie or novel or show follows it. So if you're just emulating even part of it, then you'll hit some of it. But if you don't know about the formal steps, let's call them, then you can experiment more and more freely, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I really liked a lot of the, you were in my class, and I read a lot of themes into the book. You're a very good writer in that you put a lot out there, and for the reader to grasp onto. I feel like nobody's going to read this book the same way as anyone else. It's one of those books where, like, book clubs will argue over it, I think.
And causing arguments. That's great.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. That's what you want in a book. Like, what's a good example? Well, it's a young female protagonist, and I noticed that all of the men that were safe were also like non-threatening in a oh god, what's the polite way to say this? But like they were very like avuncular men that were non-safe, and then there were men that were not safe, and I liked taking that into the real world, and it's almost like she was learning to navigate, learning who was safe and who was not, as much as people do in the real world even.
Yeah, absolutely. I think teenagers of any gender, when they're interacting with new adults, that's always something that you have to figure out for yourself with body language and interactions and language and how that works. So it was kind of interesting to kind of pare that down and think back to being a teenager or someone who's just in a new environment and kind of figure out, okay, who are my people, who are displaying traits that I'm interested in, who are people who maybe have, a little red flag or things like that. So it was actually pretty interesting to do it that way. And you pointed that out, as did one or two people afterwards. So I take that to mean I did a good job with it, or I did it correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really well done novel. I'm jealous of how good you are at writing right out of the gate. It's annoying. I don't know who you think you are.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
But yeah, so you have an odd distinction, because there is a number 1 on the cover of this book. Yeah, you have this beautiful cover done by a local artist, Kelsey Power. But the cover's significant in a few different ways. It's got this number on the front. It's got book 1 right there on the front.
Right there.
Yeah, I don't usually let people do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the Infinity series, if you go back and look at it, there's no number on it because we hadn't written the second book yet and weren't even confident enough in ourselves. Like, what if it doesn't ever come out? You know what I mean? Like, the only reason there's numbers on the old Black Womb books was because I already had 10 of them written. So I'm like, all right, we're good. These are going to come out unless something goes catastrophically wrong. The Starving and Broken Spire are both getting sequels, but there's no number on the cover kind of thing. Like, the amount of faith I have to put a number on the cover and be like, no, there will be more, is just, like, it's more faith than I have in myself.
I didn't realize that was a thing. I just thought, yep, there's more books. Why not put a 1? It'll make it easier.
Yep, that is true. It does make it easier after the fact. Yeah. But it's really cool. I do have a lot of faith that the rest of them are going to come out. And how many do you envision? And it always changes, of course, but how many do you envision currently?
Always changes. So 5 in total. I mean, I'm not set on that. I have the titles for them, which are, thematically pleasant. But,
okay.
It all depends on feedback. Once, this story is written, if people think, oh, this part is unnecessary from this book and this book, so maybe it might go down to 4. Or I happen to be an overwriter, which I know you're aware of, and a few people. So I tend to, I won't say ramble, because it's not rambling, but there are a lot of words used in places. I guess just because of that fact, it might go up to 6, but I'm not hoping for that by any means. So 5 is the goal.
Okay. 5 is a good goal. That's very doable. I wouldn't call you a rambler either. It was very strange to read the last draft of it that I did, because I kind of went in with a red pen and going, I can't remember what the word count is now, but it's well over 100,000 words, and this is a YA, late YA, like young adult kind of aimed at novel that were aimed at that age group, but I think it could be enjoyed by anyone. But I went in with a red pen to try and lop off some of it, you know what I mean, to get it into that age range for the size of it, and just couldn't. Like, it's all... Rambling kind of implies that, like, you're just going off on tangents, like Stephen King does sometimes, or something like that, but it's all needed. So that's wonderful. It makes for an amazing, good, and very fast read. Like, you're done it before you would think you would be at that word count. Like, it's very enjoyable and you get through it quite quickly. But it was frustrating because my red pen is still full of ink.
Yes. Yeah, I had someone whose mission it was to remove something like 20,000 words, which is fine because that would bring it to the I'll say historical or the wanted word count for that particular genre.
Sure.
And not only did that not happen, but that person suggested some stuff I could add.
Was that Allie?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, thankfully. She is an amazing editor, by the way. I haven't finished one of her books. I went to her book launch last year, I guess that was now. So I have, they're in the to-be-read pile, which, as everyone knows, keeps growing and never shrinking.
Yep.
Her feedback was great. She has a little punch sometimes when she writes something, so she made a character note for someone that actually made me laugh out loud, which was really appreciated because that was the way I was headed with that character, so it was good to see that it came across correctly. And just, I love constructive criticism. She's really good at it, and I hope to work with her again in the future because I think she's just phenomenal.
Making you laugh out loud is one of the few short-term goals I have in life. Like, I have many long-term goals, but on the list of, like, short-term ones, like, ooh, let's see if we can do this today, making you laugh out loud is one of them, because it's always unexpected. It's always like, I've never laughed before, oh dear, and it just explodes. It's wonderful.
What a nice way to describe it. Thank you so much.
Sorry. But yeah, Allie is...
Not in your 5-year plan, though, Matt. Just a little wounded.
Yeah. Yeah, Allie is an amazing editor, an amazing writer. She also self-edits the same way, and we'll sit around when one of her novels comes in and just look at it, and Erin once commented, our editor-in-chief, when she read The Fifth Queen, she commented, "You're just paying me to read this." Like, it's, yeah. She's very, she's a perfectionist.
I love it.
Yeah, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be interested if you ever do get to reading one of those, what your thoughts are on it, because I paired you two correctly. I paired you two together because of similar tones and material and stuff like that. So I'd definitely be interested in your thoughts.
Correct.
And you're published now, so your thoughts matter more. Your thoughts go on the back of books and stuff.
Well, that's great, because I'm always full of opinions.
You are.
Mm-hmm.
I can never tell which of them are real and sarcastic, or if you actually have a mode that's not sarcastic. But yes, you do.
That's for you. You can figure that out. That's your brain teaser.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd love to talk more about Ash. Well, actually, yes, I actually do want to talk a little bit about Ashes and the setup to it, for lack of a better word. So I want to talk about the prologue and the initial kind of Act 1 setup of it without giving away too much. So this features, the star of this is a young girl named Phoenix, who as a child was orphaned in a war with gargoyles. Am I correct? Do I remember that correct?
That is, yeah, that's pretty on spot, for sure.
Which is crazy. And there's this wonderful, wartime opening scene of her being orphaned, which is just spectacularly done, and just immediately there's so much lore without the lore being obtrusive. You just want to know more about what's happening, and you give it out in these little drips, just to drive people insane, your readers, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's my plan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very good. I'm not typically a fantasy reader, but this is very good fantasy, a very good high fantasy. It's some of the best I've read, actually.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So this is going to be fun. So, Lauralana Dunne, if you could tell your younger writing self any one thing, what would it be?
How young are we talking about here?
As young as you like.
As young as I like. Well, routine is great, so figure that out. If you go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, it's a lot easier to plan your day for writing time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've strangely gotten a better schedule since the pandemic started happening. I don't know how that is. I keep seeing stories of everyone else, losing their schedule, and I'm like, no, I've been asleep the same time and awake the same time every day.
I think it was a reset for you, because you were always on the go, and now you don't have to be.
Yeah, no, that is fair. I've also changed my schedule so that the first thing I do every morning is write, and I find I like writing, so it makes me want to get up, whereas if I'm getting up to do what I would call work, I hit the snooze button 40 times,
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I always had the issue, I was a night writer, and I still am a night owl completely. Now it's just, with life, I'm too tired to write, late in the evenings. But because I would get into a groove, I wouldn't go to bed until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And then the next day would be a fun adventure of navigation. And since reversing that even though it's not intuitive, it's much more helpful. It works better.
Yeah, I agree. I used to be a night writer too, and I don't know. I think it's just about I think that's what comes naturally to a lot of people, but it's you kind of should train yourself to have it so that you can have a better work-life balance.
Yeah, I think it's easier to shrug it off if you leave it till later.
Yeah.
Because you're too tired or you got caught up in something else, which I mean is valid because life happens and this is not a judgment thing, but having had moved it to a specific time during the day, whether it's like, well, you do it first thing in the morning. I can't because I have a young child, so I'll do it after, just as he goes to bed. So that's the writing time.
Yeah.
So chances are if I'm home and he's being put to bed, I don't have anything really planned necessarily to do during that time. So if I could have done that 10, 15 years ago, we would have been a lot farther ahead for sure.
Cool. I also find it funny that I'm like, you were just like, I don't want to judge people, and I'm like, are you sure this is Laura?
I will judge people for many things, let's be honest, but not for going about your day like you need to go about your day.
That's fair.
Can't really dictate how someone should spend their time, just so long as, they're not being a dingleberry about it.
That's fair. Lauralana Dunne, what's the best money you ever spent as a writer? So that can be anything you spent money on that you can think you used for your writing. It can be a physical object, it can be classes, it can be a typewriter, anything.
I use a lot of free stuff, I'm going to be honest.
Cool.
Yeah, I use Google Docs, so that's a free cloud system. So that's where my drafts usually are. My Chromebook, which is what I'm currently using, was actually a gift from my husband, so that was very thoughtful of him for the purpose of writing. So I use that for writing. I coordinate with Google Docs to my cell phone, which came under a plan. I do, like most authors, have a weird collection of non-used journals, always very good. I don't know if it's an aesthetic thing or if it just puts you in the mindset, but journal shopping is super fun, even if you never use them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to say money that I've spent going to seminars or to writing classes or to networking events with other authors.
That's fair.
Yeah. That's obviously not a day-to-day thing. I certainly don't do that every single day. I've probably done maybe 5 to 10 in the last few years. But it's really nice. Writing by nature is a solitary act. So getting out and meeting people who are also doing that solitary act kind of reaffirms that you're doing it correctly, I guess, or you're on the right path. And I think if anyone is serious about any type of craft they're involved in, going to workshops and going to developmental talks or teachings or, workshops, things like that is important and kind of a given, because everyone can use a refresher or everyone can use a different set of eyes or can just talk about it. It's a really nice thing to do, and I think it's really beneficial.
Cool. All right, wonderful. Thank you. Good answer.
Thanks.
Lauralana Dunne, what did you do with the first money you ever got from writing?
I think I bought a really nice fountain pen.
That'll do it, yeah?
Yeah, some nice ink. Good
so you don't
nib.
Just collect journals?
No. The journals, a lot of them aren't necessarily written in, so maybe I would call those a collection, even though they're just stacked on a shelf somewhere. While the pens themselves I do actually use. Oh. I guess, yeah, I would collect them for a useful purpose.
Okay. I can never find a time to use my pens, because the only time I use a pen is when I have to write something very quickly, where I'm like, oh, I just had an idea, or oh, I forgot to do this thing, or oh, I need to add it to my to-do list. And it'll be like this super quick, like, reach for the closest ballpoint, scribble it down, and then go. I don't let myself have lead pencils anymore, because I used to not care if there was paper around, and I'd just write it on the wall.
Yeah, I can see why that would be problematic, for sure.
Yeah, because sometimes it doesn't erase, and then you've got a problem.
Then you have a problem. I actually bought a red fountain pen, so the outside is this beautiful red, almost like a dragon scale type pattern, and I got the reddest, darkest ink, and that's my editing pen.
Okay, that makes a degree of sense. That gets you in the mood.
It focuses. It's like a weird little ritual. If someone's given me their book or their piece of writing to look over, chances are, if it's a substantial one, I will actually print it off and do it by hand first to make some notes, and then I pull that little guy out of there, and I'm sure somewhere there's villagers running and screaming in terror, and then I get to work.
Okay. All right, sounds good. I have a dragon pen, and I think of the words as villagers running in terror. Die, die, die.
It puts me in the mindset for constructive criticism.
Okay. Wow.
Right.
That's awesome. Yeah. Lauralana Dunne, what was an early experience you had where you learned that language can have power?
Gonna have to say working in customer service.
Really? That's an interesting answer. Do elaborate.
Well, most people, maybe that's a generalization, but a lot of people, their first jobs are in customer service, and usually they're aged, I guess. So if you're dealing with the public and they are upset and you use the incorrect word, you're going to figure that out very quickly.
Yes.
Yes.
I remember that, yes.
Right, yeah. So I think learning to navigate language correctly is a skill set that is important for people. I know here in Newfoundland, it's very interesting because we have so many different dialects and meanings to different words. And then when we move away to live in places where they speak more so what I'll call the Queen's English, there's a bit of a barrier there at times. It's very interesting to see the way that language is perceived or words are used in different scenarios, which is hard to take into writing to carry it over. I think that might have been one of my bigger struggles. I once made a quip where I said, I'm expected to use the Queen's English, but I grew up speaking Newfoundlandese. So there's a bit of a disconnect if you've never really studied different things like proper punctuation or grammar or conjugation, I guess, for when you're changing words for different tenses.
Yeah.
And I think I struggle with that a bit more than a lot of people because I haven't really done a lot of formal training in that. I kind of just write what I know from reading and speaking, which I think is pretty popular. Yeah. And a lot of people do it. So I guess really the short answer for that long answer is that it's still an ongoing learning experience because language is A, ever evolving, but B, is so different to so many different people. There's a lot of nuances to it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And God bless editors.
Yes. Editors are wonderful, wonderful human beings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the Right Project podcast, Lauralana. You can all check out Lauralana Dunne's first novel, Ashes, currently available for order. Thank you again, Lauralana.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem, anytime. So, dear listeners, you might have noticed or picked up on during the course of that interview was from before the book came out, and there were several things that had to be cut out, referencing to pre-orders or the book coming out in June as the future tense or something like that. The book is currently out on and available on Amazon and wherever finer books are sold, as well as through the Engine Books website. Please, if you're like YA or fantasy or anything of that stripe, or you know anyone that does, please check out this new author and her first book, Ashes by Lauralana Dunne. She is an amazing talent, and it's truly a book you'll love forever. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day. All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.